The views presented here do not reflect the opinions of Lamplight Group or its members. The information presented here is, just that, information. Whether it is right or wrong is for you to decide. Keep an open mind and let bias for one word or another, one concept or another, pass through you. Everything in your life has led you to this moment. Now is your chance to embrace it fully. Everything has been slowly and steadily progressing towards a monumental goal of divine proportions, for you to find yourself, consciously and fully. As with all things, find your own truth, research for yourself, and in doing so discover the greatest treasure of all life, yourself. Namaste.
Since the fall of Atlantis, Satan and his minions have been working tirelessly to end all goodness on this planet. But God and the Brotherhood of Light have put together their own plan to defeat the dark side. Throughout history, many prophets have come forth to speak of the coming golden age of humanity. This truth was made known only to fall silent on the deaf ears of the ignorant masses, but change is on the horizon. By the time of the Renaissance, humanity had begun to rise from its slumber. Slowly, mysticism and superstition began to be replaced with science and logic. It is here 400 years ago, at the height of Tudor England, where this story begins. A secret marriage was arranged between Queen Elizabeth I and Sir Robert Dudley. Due to Dudley's political ambitions, the Queen chose to maintain her Virgin Queen status. From this marriage came forth Francis Bacon, who was raised by an adopted family. At the age of 15, while his parents were arguing, he overheard the truth, that he was the future heir of the King of England. All his life, the Queen kept dangling in front of him the mantle of power. To be or not to be, that was his question. Alas, it was not to be. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth appointed King James VI of Scotland to be her successor. Instead of letting this defeat him, Francis chose to rise above his circumstances in the pursuit of scholarly and political interests. He had the King James Bible translated. He wrote the Shakespearean sonnets. He persuaded King James I to charter Newfoundland and was an officer in the Virginia Company. He was King James's Lord Chancellor, and he fathered deductive reasoning, which set the grounds for science and technology to liberate humanity. Secretly, he was a master of the alchemical sciences and the occult. It was here that he began to remember his past lives as the prophet Samuel, Plato, Saint Joseph, Merlin, Roger Bacon, and Christopher Columbus. When he was the prophet Samuel, he helped liberate the children of Abraham from the bondage of corrupt priests and the Philistines. In the 5th century, while Europe was falling into the Dark Ages, he returned again as Merlin to help King Arthur establish Britain into a stronghold against ignorance and superstition. a place where Christ's achievement could flower, and devotion to the one source could prosper in the quest for the Holy Grail. It was later in the 19th century when his efforts blossomed, when the United Kingdom became a place where industry and individual initiative could thrive as never before in 12,000 years. As the medieval alchemist Roger Bacon, he predicted the invention of a hot air balloon, a flying machine, a magnifying glass, and mechanically propelled ships and carriages, and amazingly, he wrote of them as if he had seen them. He believed true knowledge stems not from the authority of others, nor from a blind allegiance to antiquated dogmas, but instead is a highly personal experience, a light that is communicated only to the innermost privacy of the individual through the impartial channels of all knowledge and of all thought. Because of the heretical nature of these beliefs, the church imprisoned him, where he remained for his final years. In his Opus Majus, he wrote of a voyage of 3 ships and a discovery of a new world. The sea between the end of Spain on the west and the beginning of India on the east is navigable in a very few days if the wind is favorable. In his next life as Christopher Columbus, he was inspired by these words, and along with a prophecy made by Isaiah, he knew a new world would be found, whereby God would recover the remnant of his people, and shall assemble the outcast of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. Isaiah 11:12. When Francis Bacon became conscious of these incarnations, he sought those hidden treasures he placed away until his rebirth. At the age of 12, Francis conceived of a time when mankind would go through a period of great restoration. In 1620, he placed this vision for humanity in his book, The Great Instauration, in which he formalized how to change the whole wide world through the restoration of true knowledge after centuries of obscurity and neglect. It was here that he first devised a scientific method that ultimately launched a new English Renaissance. Many of his ideas were kept in the shroud of secret societies in order to hide from the prying eyes of church officials. With help from his brother Anthony and some friends who were students at Gray's Inn Law School, they created a secret society known as the Knights of the Helmet. They chose this name from the goddess Athena, who is depicted as wearing Pele's helmet of invisibility and carrying a golden spear of knowledge. The goddess Athena brings about wisdom, intellect, and the moral side of human life. Athena's helmet of invisibility represents her silent war against ignorance and sloth. The Knights of the Helmet also consider themselves invisible warriors against ignorance and sloth, as they secretly worked to expand the English language by creating new literatures not written in Latin, but instead in words all Englishmen could understand, such as found within the King James Bible. In 1611, the King James edition of the Bible was commissioned in order to unite the Anglican and Puritan church leaders. After a long series of edits by nondescript translators, the final draft was handed to King James, who then passed it on to Francis Bacon so that he could revise the Bible into a marvelous piece of literary work which is still being used today. Many of these works were written anonymously under pen names such as William Shakespeare. Francis chose this name because the goddess Athena was known to carry a golden spear of knowledge, which she would use to strike at the serpent of ignorance. When sunlight would strike her spear, it was known to tremble. Thus the people would say she was shaking her spear again, hence the word Shakespeare. In a symbolic gesture, Francis would shake his pen as a spear of knowledge to slay the dragons of foolishness. Written within the Shakespearean plays is a hidden cipher which shows Francis Bacon not only as the true heir of the King of England, but also of Queen Elizabeth's secret marriage to the Earl of Leicester and her preceding 2 sons. For upon his birth, Francis Bacon was given over to Sir Nicholas and Lady Anne, who pleaded with the Queen for the life of the child. Queen Elizabeth rejected her son because she feared her subjects would choose a male heir over herself to rule the kingdom. Some historical documents hint of the secret marriage and her 2 children, such as found within this portrait. However, any talk of this during the time of Queen Elizabeth would have resulted in imprisonment or death. After a happy childhood spent with Sir Nicholas and Lady Anne, on his 12th birthday, he was enrolled in Cambridge University. Mysteriously, Queen Elizabeth provided the funds for his education. At the age of 15, he discovered the true identity of his royal blood, so Queen Elizabeth sent Francis abroad to France, placing him at a comfortable distance from her throne. While in France, he studied cipher codes to learn new ways to protect confidential information in England, and he also worked with Masonic secret societies which sought to reform the French language. 3 years later, upon his return to England, he brought back these same ideas and created a secret society known as the Knights of the Helmet, which through their literary works would ultimately modernize the English language by standardizing the spelling of words. The Knights of the Helmet was part of a larger movement of secret societies found within Rosicrucian teachings, which dated back to the time of Atlantis. The Rosicrucians were a loose-knit group of secret societies which believed knowledge or wisdom was eternal and should be freely available to those who seek it. Just like with the Knights of the Helmet, the Rosicrucian secret society was also part of this movement. The Rosicrucian is shorthand for the Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross, which was founded in 1571 to protect Queen Elizabeth after she was excommunicated by the Pope. And secretly, they sought to bring about universal enlightenment through the use of the alchemical process. The Golden Cross symbolized the transmutation of the base elements into spiritual light. The Red Cross symbolized the heraldic color of the metal gold. These colors were often associated with Saint George and Archangel Michael. And the rose symbolized the heart of the cross, where one could find love, intelligence, and enlightenment within the human soul. Just like with Athena's helmet of invisibility, members of the Rosicrucian would make silent oaths under the principle of sub rosa, or beneath the rose. They believed it was best to be discreet and conceal some things, while revealing others, in order to create a treasure trail to those who seek truth. And as Athena would shake her spear at the snakes of ignorance, so could St. George shake his spear at the dragons of vice. Members of these societies understood that if an individual could be a powerful force of change, so could they, in larger numbers, slay the dragons of the world. It was here, as a member of the Rosicrucian secret society, that Francis Bacon became inspired to write his famous Great Instauration, which would restore paradise on earth through knowledge and virtue. In addition to the Rosicrucian and the Knights of the Helmet secret societies was the Freemason secret society, whose members passed down the secrets of building the massive cathedrals and castles of Europe. After the death of Queen Elizabeth in 1603, King James succeeded to the throne. During his reign, Francis was promoted to Viscount St. Albans and Lord Chancellor, which was the highest positions of power one could obtain in that era other than the king himself. He was given the task to reform Freemasonry, which in late Elizabethan England was more of a social clique for the elite. He sought to change operative Freemasonry of the medieval stone guilds into speculative Freemasonry, that is, a fraternal order of philosophers that would create the world as God made it and not as men or the church made it, a place where religious and political strife could be placed aside under its three great Masonic principles of brotherly love, relief for the poor, and seekers of truth. He then redrafted the 9 degrees of the Knights of Templar into 33 degrees, which became the basis of modern-day Freemasonry. Many of these initiations were based on Christian ethics, with a focus on the realization of one's own inner Christ consciousness. Francis chose 33 initiations of Freemasonry from a simple Elizabethan cipher, which equal to the numerical value of his signature. By assigning a number for each letter of the alphabet, the name Bacon equals to 33. Continuing his mission that he first begun as Christopher Columbus, he persuaded King James to sign the Virginia Charter, which began the colonization of the New World, with England's first permanent colony at Jamestown. Here his Masonic teachings of inner divine potential, freedom, and enlightenment spread, which later resulted in the creation of the United States of America under its Masonic founding fathers. In his book, The New Atlantis, he foretold of a Pacific island where science prevailed over ignorance and superstition. This island had no rulers, but instead a learned council of men who had proven themselves